Hello everyone, and welcome to our second session of parenting in a pandemic. What I'd like to think about is last week we talked about why movement is so important. And I hope you've taken away some ideas and maybe tried some of them out in the time in between our sessions. Remember, we have the chat box. Please put in any questions, any observations, anything that you've tried this week with your children that's worked well, so we can share our ideas and make the session a little more interactive. So today we're going to be looking at being physically literate and how you can help your children to be physically literate. And if you're sitting there thinking, Lesley, I don't know what physical literacy means, hopefully by the end of the session we'll have talked about that. And you'll have a much greater understanding and much more ideas to go away with and play with your children and have fun. So I'm going to share a presentation with you and we'll just look through a few of those activities, and then we're going to, like we did last week, we're going to go through them practically and have a try doing them. So if anyone's ready to do them with me, please feel free. So, first and foremost, becoming physically literate. How can you as parents help your children become physically literate, and what does that mean? This is the definition of physical literacy from the International Physical Literacy Association. If you read through that, it's not just about being competent. It's not just about being able to do the movements. It's about actually having the motivation to go out and do them and the confidence. And sometimes you might know that your children can actually do those things, but they're a little bit shy and lacking in confidence, and so are worried about going outside to actually try and do them. One of the important things that we're trying to achieve through this is engage in physical activity for life. There is an association called NICE in the UK, which gives guidance around lots of medical areas, but also in the amount of physical activity guidelines. And they looked at the barriers to people taking part in physical activity. And one of those things was a perceived lack of confidence or competence, sorry. So that as children or as adults, we decide that we can't do something. So then we think, well, I'm not going to do that because I can't. And what actually happens is actually we're never going to get better at it if we don't go out and have a go. So we know from our session, the last session, that learning about movement doesn't come naturally. It comes through lots of practice. So we're only going to get better at something when we practice it a lot. So it's about motivation, confidence, and that physical competence. There's a little lady coming up on the next slide who can explain this much better than I can. So have a listen to her.
Ticking. You have until I'm 7 years old to make sure I can do this, this, and this. Obviously, I can already do this stuff because I get lots of help. Loads of kids don't and are really missing out. It's called physical literacy. We need you to help us as early as possible, so we can do all kinds of things when we're older. We'll try anything at this age. So now's the time to help us, before it's too late. Because if we don't learn these basic skills now, we might just give up. We might never discover what we could have been good at, and we might turn into couch potatoes. So fire us up, inspire us. If you don't, you're asking us to settle for a life that's shorter and less healthy. And we don't want that, do we?
Okay, as I said at the beginning of the session, please feel free to put any comments, any questions into the chat box. For me, the important things in that video is the very, very first thing the little girl said. The clock is ticking. You have until I am 7 years old. Now, when we're saying that, we don't mean that if children aren't physically literate by the time they're 7, that they can never be physically literate. But what we mean is the best windows of opportunity are before children are 7. So you are in a fantastic opportunity time to give your children opportunities now to help them become physically literate adults. That means they can take part in a wide range of different activities. They're confident, they've got that movement confidence, and they enjoy it. Because one of the reasons why we don't enjoy things is sometimes if we think we can't do it, then we don't enjoy it as much. So it's around us as parents, giving our children as many opportunities as we can and a wide range of opportunities. Because sometimes there's a temptation to actually, some sports, for example, demand early specialization. So, for example, if you want to be a swimmer, you have to start training very early on. If you want to be a gymnast, you have to start training very early on. If I give you a personal example, my daughter was a gymnast, a very accomplished gymnast, but that involved hours and hours of training at the gym. She's trained over 20 hours a week for her gymnastics. And this meant that actually, as body control, she was very strong, she was very flexible, she was able to do lots of different movements. But part of being physically literate is about object control. It's about being able to kick and catch a ball, hit a cricket ball with a cricket bat. So she was actually very good at lots of aspects of physical literacy, but she wasn't great at object control because she'd sort of missed that out in her development because she specialized so early as a gymnast. So the best thing that you can do for your children is actually give them that wide range. Try and think about, when we talk about what fundamental movement skills are, what opportunities do your children have and how do you help them develop those? Now, those opportunities don't necessarily have to be in organized sports clubs, because our children develop a lot of their fundamental movement skills and physical literacy skills by just being out and playing with friends, playing in the park, just playing with you. Lots of different things, and it doesn't have to be with expensive equipment. So just thinking of giving your children as many different opportunities as you can. So the importance of being physically literate. If I said to you, let's have a look at all of these different sports and activities. So these are just a list. There are many, many more of physical activities that children and adults might want to take part in. This research came from Edinburgh University. So if we look at all of those and then say, actually, if you have a child who can't catch, what happens to the list of sports that are actually open to them? If they want to think, oh, I want to go and have a try at that. If they can't catch, look what happens to the list of sports they can take part in. All of a sudden, we take out a lot of opportunities for children and adults, because those physical literacy is a journey from being born right through to adulthood. And our physical literacy abilities change when we're younger or when we get older. But the ability to catch is a very important ability for those activities. We've taken out a huge chunk of activities that we can take part in. And I would also think, if we cast our minds back to our last session, if we talk about the midline and things being further away from the midline being more difficult, if you think that someone can't get their hands in the right place to catch a ball, I would argue that they would find it very difficult to get a tennis racket or a badminton racket into the correct place to actually be able to hit it. So we're straight away actually reducing a lot of the opportunities that we can give to children. So as I said, it's about giving them that wide range. Children also, and adults, develop strategies to avoid doing things that are practicing things that they think they're not good at. If I give you an example, I have a friend who a few years ago had a birthday party for her son, who was around 7 at the time. It was a beautiful day, so they were playing football outside as a big bunch. Then she decided that she might change the game, give them something else to play. So she decided she would play rounders. Rounders is an English game, a little bit like baseball, where you hit the ball out and then you have to run around some bases. And this one little boy said, I don't want to play that game. And she said, well, if you don't want to, you don't have to. So he sat at the side. But after a while, she was looking at him and seeing that he looked more and more unhappy. So she went to talk to him and said, why don't you want to play? Initially, he became quite aggressive and saying, I don't want to play, it's a rubbish game. But then as she sat by him a little while longer, he eventually said, I can't catch. So at 7-year-old, he had opted out of the activity because he thought he couldn't catch and he didn't want his friends to see he couldn't catch. Now that is a sad reflection on PE teachers and in schools and coaches, but it's also for us as parents to be saying, well, how can I make sure my child has the opportunity to develop those skills? And catching, as we can see, is a hugely important one. I'm just going to stop that share and see if we have anything in our chat box. Okay, I'm going back into sharing. So what we're looking at here is what we would say a true multi-skills approach. So if we want children to be very good at games and physical activities, then what we need to be looking at is making sure that we give them the right building blocks. And the right building blocks are fundamental movement skills. As you can see from the slide, it talks about agility, balance, and coordination. But more often from a child development perspective, we call it locomotion, object control, and stability. Locomotion is about getting from one place to another, and that will be in a variety of ways. Object control might be catching a ball, kicking a ball, but it's also about being able to hold a pencil properly, being able to eat with a knife and fork. And stability is about that balance, not just sitting still or standing still, but also when we're moving, being able to maintain that balance. And today, what we're going to look at is locomotion and stability activities, and we'll look at some object control activities in part of our session next week. So we're going to have a look at the practical and have a look at what these are. So if I whiz on to our next slide, these are looking at the fundamental skills. So first of all, we'll look at locomotion. And as I said, about getting from one place to another. Stability and object control. So under locomotion, we have activities like this: crawling, rolling, stepping, walking, running, all of those different activities. In stability, standing, landing, so we need to be able to jump down from something and stand and be able to land without falling over or without hurting ourselves. And then object control, about reaching, grasping, throwing, catching, kicking, all of those things come into object control. So what we're going to look at in a nutshell is helping our children develop a movement vocabulary. The wider the movement vocabulary they have, the better it is. So we want them to know what their body can do. It can run, jump, hop, skip, but we want it also to know where it can do that, because it can do it high, it can do it low, lots of different levels. How the body moves, we can stomp, we can tiptoe, we can go fast, we can go slow, and then things like with who or what the body can move. So can I go behind somebody, in front of someone? So we're just going to take a basic movement and then we're going to adapt it in lots of ways. And hopefully you'll have lots of ideas to do this with your children. So I'm going to stop the share, and we're going to have a look at some of the activities. So if you're going to join in with me, find yourself a space and let's get going. First of all, we're going to look at locomotion, and we're going to start off with just walking. Now, it might be a long time since you've thought about how you walk, but it's strange when you start thinking about it. You really have to think, because normally it's automatic and you never think about it. So all I'd like you to do, first of all, is just walk around and think about how you walk. Think about which part of your foot hits the ground first. Think about what your arms do when you're walking. Think about all of those activities. So normally we would walk with our arms in opposition. So if the right foot forward, right leg goes forward, left arm forward, and we swap like this. Sometimes children don't do that. Sometimes children walk like this, which looks very strange. We can practice asking them to walk on their tiptoes. Can you walk on your heels? Can you take big steps? Can you take small steps? And with this one, the important thing is that we say, can you? Because if we ask children, can you, then it doesn't matter if they can't. We're not saying walk on your tiptoes, walk on your heels. We're saying, can you do this? Can you do this? So as I say, it doesn't matter if they can't. They're trying lots of different things. So we just take walking, and if we think about how you walk, as I said, walk tall, walk small, walk forwards, walk backwards, walk sideways, walk like a pixie, walk like an elephant. And you might think, well, Lesley, does it make a difference if children know how to walk lightly or if they need to stomp? Well, actually, yes, it does. So if we think about what we need children to be able to do is walk no matter what the environment is. So if you think about, if I give you a UK example and then use a more appropriate Abu Dhabi one maybe, in England, very soon, as you can see, the grey skies are starting here, we will have ice on the ground. It's very different walking on ice to walking on the ground normally. We might have to lower our centre of gravity a little bit and make sure we're not going to fall. Same maybe in Abu Dhabi, if you get off your lounger and decide you're going to go into the sea. And it's really hot, so how do you walk on hot sand? You walk in very different ways. So we need to give children the movement vocabulary to change the way they walk. And if we think of that from a PE example, if children, we need to teach children how to hit something hard or hit something soft, so that when they're learning to play tennis, they can either make a decision, do I want to do a really soft tip over the net, or do I want to do a really hard one down the court? So by asking them to explore the ways they move, we're actually giving them the tools to take part in all of these physical activities. If we think about the stomp that I said earlier on, if I'm playing a game where there's lots of people on the same pitch and I want to move past somebody, I need to know how to push hard to go off in the other direction. Or I might decide that I want to move very quickly around someone. The ability to either push hard or do something very lightly only comes through practice. So we can take one movement and look at lots of different ways of changing it. So we might also say, can you make a pattern on the floor? So can you walk round in a circle? Can you walk round in a square? We'll be doing more of this next week when we look at maths and English in PE. So lots of different ways of walking. We might also then decide, let's do some speeding up and slowing down. So can we walk fast? Can we walk slow? And what you could do there, if you've got more children, you can ask them to walk in a line, maybe 2 or 3 in a line, and the person at the front decides how fast they're going to go. So the leader can either walk slowly, walk fast. Everybody else has to try and maintain the same distance. Then they can start walking tall, walking small, walking sideways, walking with big steps, small steps on their heels. So you can do so many things with just walking. Another thing that works very well is actually putting music on and letting children, seeing how children move in different ways to different types of music. And just put some music on and you can have a listen. So if we had this music. That music gets children to move around very quickly. How about this one? Sometimes when I put that music on, children go, whoa, this is scary. And they get scary faces, but the way their movement changes is they stomp and everything is heavy. Similarly, this one. This one is a nice one. Okay, so you can see just by having a little playlist, loud stompy music, happy bouncy music, sad music. This one makes children move sad. And that's a nice one for actually discussing with children about how they feel. How would you move when you're happy? How would you move when you're sad? How might you move when you're a little bit frightened? So asking children to actually demonstrate emotions as well can be an interesting one. Marching on the spot might be a nice one for us to use. So if we're standing and we can go right, left, right, left, right, left. Then we might start putting somewhere they change directions. So we might march on the spot, then turn around on the spot, and around again, and around again. Then we can go forwards, and backwards, and sideways. And we could actually ask children to make up a pattern on the floor. So they can make up their own. So we've done a little bit of marching, but then the creativity is down to them. You can choose a nice song, a nice bit of music that has marching. If I play this one, you can see how it fits with the marching. Okay, so hopefully you can see how that's given us some, just some different ways of looking at locomotion. Play some music and you can do all of those things. Can you do it high? Can you do it low? Can you do it backwards, forwards? No matter what the movement could be, it can be skipping, could be jumping, could be hopping, could be running, but you can change it all the time thinking about where can we do it? High, low, forwards, backwards. How can we move? Slowly, quickly, softly, heavily, and with whom or what the body can move. So it might be we move with a partner. I don't have a partner, but I have a little teddy. So imagine I have someone to work with. Can I go behind them? Can they walk behind me? Can I walk beside a partner? Or it could be with a piece of equipment. Can you walk and bounce a ball? Can you walk along a line? All of those different things we can change. Just gives you the idea of what that might look like. The other thing we're going to look at is stability. Some of the activities and the exercises we did last week actually lend themselves to stability as well. So let's say we start with a balance on the floor. So it might be that we start sitting down and we balance, lifting our feet off the ground as well. So actually this means that children are just balancing on their bottoms. So hands and feet off, that's already quite hard. And it might be that we say, can you stretch out, still keeping your hands and feet off? And you might get a lot of children going, ow, 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 that hurts. But then if we introduce something that distracts it, so we might say, feet up, stretch out, teddy on your tummy, on your head, on your shoulder, on your elbow, on your tummy, on your knees, on your head, on your elbow, on your shoulder. And actually then the children are distracted by doing the activities with the cuddly toy, and they're not thinking, oh, that hurts. And what we're doing, if we go back to last week, we're building up that core stability, but we're doing it through actually sitting and balancing on our bottom. We can also sit and balance and pass the ball around, or pass it to somebody else, pass it along a line. And if you remember from last week, passing it along like that helps children learn to cross the midline, which was very important for their reading and their writing. Also, stability is really important for climbing. So it might be, if you've got a local park, some of the activities children can do in the park are absolutely fantastic for developing their stability. So allowing them to climb up climbing frames or ropes, climb up to come back down the slide, all sorts of activities that they can do in the playground. And I think this links a little bit to what I was saying before about making sure your children have a wide range of activities. Now, that wide range of activities doesn't have to mean spending a lot of money to take them to golf lessons and swimming lessons, football lessons. That wide range of movement opportunities can be just activities you can do with them. The things they learn in the park are just as valuable. And actually, if they're in the park with their friends and it's unstructured, as in not supervised necessarily by adults telling them what to do, if they're trying to make up their own games and making up their own rules and they're deciding as a group how this game is going to be played. So actually those children, as well as developing their physical literacy, are developing their social skills. They're learning about compromise, cooperation, negotiation, and they're actually learning to solve problems themselves rather than coming to an adult to sort that problem for them. So almost the beginnings of democracy by being able to talk. Our children are the politicians of the future, but when they're grown-ups, they won't have their parents there to solve problems for them. They'll need to be able to solve them themselves. And some of the activities, giving them that unstructured play where they have to develop their own rules and use their own creativity, can be really powerful. So this isn't about saying, enroll your children in lots of physical activities. It's about let them do the physical activity clubs they would like to, but ensure they get lots of other physical activity opportunities that are unstructured, that aren't expensive. Okay, another activity we might do, again about stability, standing on one leg. So we might start off with just asking children to balance on one leg. The important thing with all of these fundamental skills activities that we do is getting children to do them on both sides of the body, because we will all have a favoured leg to stand on. We'll have a favoured leg to kick with. And often children will not want to practice on the leg that they're not so good at, because especially with football, for example, there's a lot of kudos around being a good footballer. So if children are very good at dribbling with their right foot and kicking with their right foot, and people think they're a really good footballer, they aren't going to really want to be showing them that they're not so good on their left. So what we need to be doing is making sure that when we're saying to children, can you kick it with that foot? Can you kick it with that foot? Can you catch it with this hand? Can you try and catch it with this hand? Same with the stability exercises. Can you stand on your right leg? Can you stand on your left leg? And then we can make these challenges continuously more difficult. So for young children, it might literally be 10 seconds. For older children, it might be 30 seconds. It might be, can you do it with your eyes shut? And if you have a try, if you balance with me and then shut your eyes, it's much harder to balance with your eyes shut than it is with your eyes open. Another activity you might want to do, now I have some nice coloured cones here, but you can do this with paper plates. Doesn't have to be expensive equipment. So we put them on the floor, and I just move the screen so you can see. We might put them on the floor around. So then you could be playing with your children and saying to them, okay, can you go down and touch the blue one? And they have to kneel down, bend the knee, go and touch the blue. They have to come back up again. They don't go there, bend the knee and stay, because that's not as challenging. So standing on one leg, bend down, can I touch the orange one? Can I touch the pink one? Can I touch the yellow one? Now the yellow one is behind me, so it's a lot more difficult. And again, doing it on the other leg. We might also, if we want to challenge some of the children, we might say, if I look here, the pink one is on my right-hand side. So it's much easier for me to go down and touch it with my right hand. What if you say to the children, you can only touch with your left hand? That means they have to go across their body. And remember from last week, when we said it was much more difficult to cross the midline. So it does challenge their balance. Something like musical statues is a really good one for children with their stability trying to be still, but looking at balancing on other parts of their body. If you look at the handouts that I've given you for these activities, I think one of them is about making letter shapes and making them on different parts of their body. Another activity that children really enjoy is called the slow race. And in the slow race, I always say to them, we're going to have a race. And a lot of the children get quite excited about it. And then I say, line up, ready, steady. And then I say, oh, hang on a minute. The person who wins this race is the person who gets to the line last. So in other words, it's the slowest runner, but you've got to keep running and you've got to keep going forwards. So this means that I'm expecting them almost to run in slow motion. So if you watch, if they're going in slow motion, their arm is up and they're running, and then they're going on to the next foot and running. So although running is a locomotion activity, the fact that we've slowed it down so much means that children actually have to balance on one leg for a significant amount of time. And they absolutely love that. I sometimes put some silly music on, like the music from Chariots of Fire. I don't know if you're familiar with that, which is very slow and tends to make the children laugh. Another one that's quite a nice activity is a game called Connect It, and you could play this with a bunch of children. And what happens with this game is they move around to music, and then when you stop the music, you shout out two body parts, and they have to put those two body parts together. So you might say elbow and knee, so they have to balance, and they have to put their knee on their elbow. Or they might kneel down, bend down to do it. You might say elbow to ear. So they have to try and get their elbow on their knee. You might say toe to knee. So they have to lift up there. And then when all of this virus and pandemic has gone and you're allowed to have children that touch each other, then they have to find a partner. And it might be nose to knee. So it's one person's nose onto somebody else's knee. The children absolutely love that. Another one, a log roll. So if we look at lying on their tummies, and they're going to get a really long, thin shape. So legs together, arms together, and they have to try and roll from their tummy onto their back, keeping their legs together. If they do this, then they're not keeping their bodies tight enough. So lots to think about. Okay, I'm aware of time here. How are we doing with anything in the box? Okay, can I go back into sharing my screen? As I said, please ask any questions, anyone, for what we've been doing, because we're almost out of time. So, for me, one of the most important things is you create the environment for your children. And that's around encouraging them, reinforcing what they're doing. As I said, getting better at movement involves lots of practice, and some of children's first attempts might seem a bit clumsy, but what we need to do is say, brilliant, you tried really hard to do that. I love the way you tried to get there in the park. I love the way you tried to pull yourself up using that rung on the ladder. But it's all positive and encouraging children. We want to give them lots and lots of time for practice. As I said, you don't get better at anything physical without practicing it. They need access to equipment. And as I said, it doesn't have to be expensive equipment, but the more different types of things that children can learn to throw, the better it is. For example, balloons are a really good piece of equipment, and we'll do a little bit more with that next week when we're doing object control. Beach ball don't tend to be expensive. Nice, gives something different. This one that's a globe is a really good one. Where do your hands land? Oh, I'm learning about North America and I'm learning about the Indian Ocean. So a bit of a learning tool at the same time as helping them learn to catch. Elimination games for me is an interesting one, because what tends to happen if children play a game where they're out, The children who are out tend to be the children who need more practice. So what ends up happening is the children who are out sit on the side and watch the children who are already good at it get better. So I would be saying, if you have games that your children play where people are out, can you look at tweaking the rules? So it might be they get 3 turns, or they have to go out and do another physical activity and then come back to the games. So it's about challenging and supporting the children, encouraging them to take a few little risks to try and, you know, get a little bit better at this. Children tend to be very good judges of risk. And as I said, it is about being safe as well, but safe, not so much that it becomes, safety is the primary concern and there's no challenge for the children because they won't learn to get any better there. So I hope that's given you an idea of what being physically literate means. And I hope it's also giving you the ideas that this isn't an expensive activity to take part in. It's about you giving your children the opportunities and having fun. The children will love it if you join in with them. Play with them. There's no right or wrong with this. Just look at all the different activities and try and make sure that children can have a go at all of those. Okay, we have a little bit of time for questions. Please don't be shy. I'm going to give a few seconds. Here we go. Let's have a look. Yes, trying to hear, getting a sports Wales accent is quite nice. Any other comments? You're welcome. Next week, we'll be looking at object control. So if you do have your children with you while we're doing this, if you have a balloon or some bubbles, the inside of a kitchen roll, the cardboard tube, we'll be using some of those next week for some of our activities. So if you'd like the children to have a go and join in, that would be fantastic. And we'll also be looking at how we can include learning, academic learning, say maths and English, for example. But this can be applied to all sorts of different activities. But we'll be looking at how we can add movement to learning and how we can learn just from basic activities that you can do in the house. There's lots of opportunities for learning about maths, for example, helping to put shopping away in the cupboard, looking at the different shapes of the objects, which things can pile on top of other ones. Would you put a tin can on a flat end or on the round end? And getting children to experiment and look at shape just from normal everyday things that they can do. So we'll be looking a little bit at that, but first and foremost, we'll be looking at object control, throwing, catching, kicking, all of those activities. So hopefully, again, you've got lots of activities to play with the children at home. There are handouts provided after this week about stability and locomotion, lots of little games. So have a try with those. And then next week, when we're back together again, you might be able to tell us some of the activities that your children particularly enjoyed, or any that ideas you have, or any that your children have, because children are fantastic at making up their own games if we give them the chance. So a couple more minutes for any chat, please, before we go. If it happens that you would like to put something in the chat box in Arabic, we have people who can tell me what you're asking or saying, so don't worry about that. Okay then, well, that's everything from me for this week. I'll see you all next week. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you have fun playing with your children between now and next week. Thank you very much.